Welcome back to Fractured but Fearless. I am Dr. Ali, and as always, this podcast is about what happens in the moment when life fractures us, not only the breaking itself, but what we become in the aftermath. Today's guest is someone whose work has taken him into some of the most difficult and defining moments of our time. Jonathan Vigliotti is an Emmy and an Edward R. Murrow award-winning CBS News correspondent. His reporting has taken him across more than 40 countries, 6 continents. He has covered disasters, conflicts, humans, and resilience. He was also a CBS correspondent for the News England Bureau. Throughout his career, he has covered some of the most devastating moments in recent history. Jonathan is also the author of Before It's Gone, which focuses on climate change, and his upcoming book, Torched, a witness account of 2025 Los Angeles wildfire. Jonathan was not only reporting on the story, he was living it. That experience has become the foundation for his book. He asks difficult questions about systems collapse, accountability, rebuilding, and what remains of us when the structures we trust fail. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lee. That means a lot. That observation means a lot. I'm thrilled to be here talking with you.
You have spent your career witnessing people lose everything: homes, communities, stability, certainty. What does that to a person over time to see that again and again and again and again?
It's a good question. And I think I'm still processing it, perhaps. I have seen people in their worst. And oftentimes when I am witnessing this, I'm experiencing it in real time as they're experiencing it. You know, when I started my career as a rookie journalist right out of college in a small market in Grand Junction, Colorado, I remember I went up and knocked on a door of a mother who lost her daughter to a shooting. And I'll never forget the feeling of walking up to that front door. In my mind, before I actually made contact with that door, knuckle on wood, it was just an assignment. This was handed to me. My news director, I had a news director. My first news director sent me on my way to go and do one of my first big stories. And in my mind, this was about achieving something for a job to then air out for others to see. I did not, in my mind at that time, process the true personal nature of what I was doing, the impact that it was going to have on me, the impact I was going to have on this person that was experiencing the worst moment in their lives. I knocked on that door and the mother answered and very quickly closed the door saying, "Go away. I want nothing to do with you," essentially. And I could have, I think in that moment been like, "Oh God, why is she making my job so hard? Why won't she just talk to me?" Certainly the way that I was walking up to that door, that was kind of how selfish I was almost being. But it was a moment that I think forever changed me. The DNA inside of me, I like re-hardwired it because I was for the first time really connecting with someone else's pain in a way that had become currency for me because it's a job, right? I realized very early on, 22-year-old me, 23-year-old me, if I'm going to do this job, it is not about getting someone to speak. It is not about producing a story for others to consume. It is about having conversations with those that are impacted in a way that is actually helpful to them first and foremost. And if not, move on. If they say yes, make sure you present it in a way that does it justice for all involved. And I'm grateful for that moment. And I'm grateful for that very early experience, starting off and making a lot of mistakes, because I think it has helped me process a lot of the pain that has followed, a lot of the awful stories, and they have grown in intensity over the years, over the different locations that I've reported from, over the different scenes that I've seen. But it all goes back to that one door knock, because no matter how big the story is, no matter how many victims there may be, no matter what that fallout is, I do try to think as much as possible about the individual, which then presents its own problem because you're absorbing that pain in ways that perhaps if you were a little more detached from it, like I was before I approached that door for the first time, I'd be able to move on, go home, not take it home with me. There is an element today where I certainly take my work home with me. Obviously, I take my work home.
Yeah.
We all take
Yeah.
our homework with us, but I take that emotion and I do take that home with me. And writing is a way for me that I have found to be so helpful, so cathartic, to releasing some of that residue, some of that pain that just sears into your heart. I mean, it really, truly does when you're with people who have lost everything. And writing's been a way to process it. Talking to my husband, talking to my friends about it has been a way to process it. I don't want to become numb to it. I have at times become numb to it. And writing, keeping my journal, and I have now over 20 journals, and many of those pages are filled with stories that have one way or another impacted me, emotionally scarred me, numbed me. And in writing, in talking, in opening up instead of bottling it in, I feel like I have connected more with humanity than become disconnected. And ultimately, it gives me the energy to keep doing what I do. And I think because ultimately, I do feel a sense of responsibility and that I am treating others as I would want to be treated, as I would want others to treat my parents, my mother. I feel good about what I do. And I also know when to not pursue something. That door knock, from that moment on, that door knock not only woke me up to the emotion on the other side of the door, it also woke me up to the idea that you don't always have to go and knock on a door. Just because you're told to go and do that, you don't have to do that. After a while, I got into this habit, which I haven't talked about much. I don't do it that often now, in case my bosses are listening. The people I work for are wonderful. They would never have me do something. They would trust my instincts. But for a while, I would say, if I didn't feel comfortable doing something, if I thought it was too early, if it was irresponsible, if it wasn't healthy for the person that I was going to speak with, if the person sending me on this assignment wasn't able to understand that, which you learn in social dynamics with those that you work with. Right. I would make up in it. I would say they weren't home. And I always have that in my pocket. You can always just say, I did a white lie, if you will. I did it. They just weren't home. And to me, that means walking away, feeling proud of what I am doing, feeling committed ultimately to the people whose story I'm supposed to tell, knowing that we are stewards of their story. When we tell stories, we become stewards of those stories. And it's, first and foremost, you want to find the facts, but you also want to find the facts while being very protective of those people delivering them. If they're victims, obviously it's a different story if it's someone trying to hide the truth. But if they're victims, especially, victim care becomes a very big part of reporting, and one that is always front of mind for me. And I think because that's the way I approach it, ultimately I'm able to walk away from each one of these scenes impacted, but not scarred in a way where I regret what I've done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I think, and I want to stay here for a bit on this topic. I think that the first thing is that there comes a time when the job actually becomes a profession, and then the profession becomes a passion, a purpose. When I started, it was just a job, right? You go and do things, and then you start to feel some events happen in your life that makes you feel them. I think that the other thing is that I think that people often focus on the event or the job, but not always on the person who keeps showing up, especially in your case, documenting it. I am also a firm believer that there is a kind of residue which stays behind while witnessing human suffering repeatedly. Even if you remain composed professionally, some part of it has to settle somewhere, right? What stays with you after the camera is nobody is seeing, right? Nobody, that is not being recorded, maybe on film, but it is being recorded here again and again and again, played again and again and again. Any particular stories, faces, or moments that comes to you?
Yeah, there's the story is in the book, and I'm not telling the story just because it's in the book. It really is one that it changed my life. It also, I felt like I, for the first time, was kind of recalibrating myself. So I've been doing this now for 20 plus years. We started talking about that door knock early on in my career. The moment I'm about to tell you made me realize that in that 20 plus window of time, I perhaps became a little bit hardened by some of the things that I had seen in the field. And so this moment was during the Palisades fire. It was that first day of the fire. At this point, it's now 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And we had been covering this fire since 11 a.m. So working nonstop around the clock. We only had a few hours to get some sleep before we had to wake up for the morning show and do it all over again. And it was myself and my producer, Christian Duran. We were driving out of the Palisades on fire, trying to find a place to sleep. If that meant pulling over and sleeping in our car on the beach, that was one possibility. We were hoping to get a room in a hotel that was still part of this expanding evacuation zone. We're now on Pacific Coast Highway, so outside of the heart of the Palisades, and I finally have some reliable service. I lost service for some time in some of the areas that we were reporting in the fire. And I got this message on my Instagram, and it's from a colleague of mine. And I open it up, and the message, and I'm paraphrasing here, says, "Hey, are you near this address? My friend's dogs are trapped inside. Can you go and rescue them?" And I remember in that moment, I was like, God, why did I open up this message? Now she sees I read it. The red receipt's there. I can't do this. I'm so tired.
The guilt of inaction.
Yeah, I can't go back right now. Like, we've been working nonstop. I'm looking at my producer. I'm like, I just got this message. Oh my God. Like, and I'm trying to rationalize it. This is the part where I feel like 20 years hardened me a little bit. Surely firefighters will go and we'll get those dogs. They will be saved. We're just journalists. It's not our job to do this. And what was crazy was the entire day we were reporting on the fact that there were no firefighters anywhere, that this response was a failed response by every single measure of what we were seeing over every single second, minute, and hour of the time in the Palisades. And I looked in the rearview mirror as I'm trying to rationalize, firefighters are on their way. They can do this. We don't have to do this. And I didn't see a single flashing light. And very consistent with the entire day at this point. Not a single first responder anywhere to be seen doing anything active. And I looked at my producer and I said, Christian, we've got to go back. Like, we've got to at least try. We can say we tried. If we can't get in, that's one thing, but we got to go back. And so we turned around. We went back. I'm texting to my colleague. I'm like, okay, what should we do? How do we do this? Hey, we're close by. We were like 15 minutes away in reality. And she's like, break the door down. She didn't know where the key was, or she said, actually do anything to break through the window. And then she gave me instructions. There were 3 dogs and they were all going to be hiding in some part of the home because they're all very scared rescue dogs. So I'm like, what are we doing here? And so we drive back, and I'm saying all of this because what unfolded will sound heroic, but it was far from heroic. It was this, step-by-step denial that just turned out to have what will be a happy ending. I wouldn't be telling the story if there wasn't one. We get there, we break through the window. The first dog is right there. We grab the dog, put it in the car. One side of the neighborhood's already on fire. The other side, where the house that we're responding to, there's fire in the backyard, and the fire is trying to surround, and there are embers everywhere. The wind is picking up. So obviously time is very urgent here. We can't waste it. The other dog was hiding underneath the bed, would not come out. We had to lift the bed up, Christian and I, and we grabbed this dog, put this dog in the backseat, and then the third dog. And the third dog was growling in the kitchen, wanted nothing to do with us, tried to grab scraps from the refrigerator to try to coax this dog into just getting into my arms. So I said, we come in peace, as if this dog will understand. I then remember there was a blanket somewhere in the bedroom. Run, grab this blanket. The fire is growing in its intensity outside the windows. We just throw this blanket off. We get this dog. We then get out of there. I don't know how many minutes. It was 5-10 minutes. We're driving back now, reaching PCH, Pacific Coast Highway. Still no help anywhere to be seen. And I have the phone number now that was texted to me by my colleague for the dog's owner. the dog's owner was traveling at the time, unaware because there were very little warnings about this weather, that there was even a threat to begin with. Like so many people in the Palisades, was unable to get in to rescue his pets in time. That's why they needed us to do this. The roads were blocked off. I call him. He picks up, and I say, it's John. Hey, it's John. We have the dogs. And he started crying and was just like, just choked up in his voice. And we reach him at this intersection, and we give him the dogs. And he just said, as he looked at me, we could lose the house. We could lose everything if we lost these dogs. Our lives would be changed forever. And he was talking about him and his wife. And that was like the most powerful thing that has happened to me, because you think of these things as options, right? Like, and they are options. I didn't have to make that choice. I could have done whatever. I could have said, we tried, and we tried to knock on the door. Nobody was there. I could have done that kind of thing. And that would have forever changed my life. And in doing, honestly, the right thing, again, if the place was really too dangerous, we would have pulled out. We wouldn't have been able to do it, but at least we tried. And in doing the right thing, it was this life-changing, this life-affirming moment for me.
Yeah.
That reminded me, no matter what you're doing, no matter what your role is, if I'm a journalist in this moment, or if I'm just myself going about my day, running errands, ultimately we are humans here to play a role and to contribute. And I am so glad. And this moment taught me that, and reminded me of this, that it is so important to be grounded in reality, which has helped me reminded me to be grounded in the story I'm covering too. It's made me a better journalist, but beyond that, because I don't care about being a better journalist. I really don't. I want to be good at what I do, obviously, but really, and this is why I'm able to do these things, see these awful moments, live some of these awful moments, is because they teach me how to be a better version of myself. And that was honestly, to this day, and I know it wasn't all that long ago, almost a year and a half ago, but there is not a day that goes by that I don't remember that I don't think about the impact a small decision had on someone else's life, and the huge impact choosing not to go would have had on this family's life. So it sticks with me forever. I like wear it on my chest. Like I feel it. And it reminds me to show up. It reminds me the importance of saying yes. And it reminds me it reminds me of the importance of not just being in the moment, but also being truly present in the moment.
And it also reminds me, this is a story I remember from my childhood. And I try to practice this myself, that there was a gentleman who was walking around, the beach, and he saw these thousands of starfishes around there. And he was picking one and throwing them into the sea. And somebody asked him, what are you trying to do? He said, I'm trying to save the starfish. And he said, you're crazy. I mean, there are thousands, millions of them over here. And he picked one, threw it into the sea, and said, well, I made a difference to that one, right? And I think that's all we can do. You don't have to, that dog that you saved, you made a difference to that family. And I think that stays with you. And that is something that resonates with me a lot too. I'm going to change gears just a little bit. Your earlier book, when you wrote Before It's Gone, that was more towards different communities, facing different climate changes. Your current book, coming from Simon Schuster, Torched, is more focused, and it is more focused about the systemic changes, not just the bearing witness, but systemic changes that can affect the lives of people. And I'm going to paraphrase it. That what really resonated with me the most, one of the things that you said about a story you shared from Los Angeles inside a burning building. You described how that you were trying to get help, and you were in a burning building. You were trying to pull some, get some attention, get some people to come in and help you. But you said that help was not there because it wasn't set up. That resonated. I mean, I think that the systemic failures, and again, the attempt you are doing is not to blame somebody, I believe, but it is that what could be done differently, not going back and trying to say that, okay, all these things are at fault, but what can we do better next time? So the idea stayed with me that the crisis itself, gives you the realization that the system is just not always ready to respond. What could be done differently? Talk to me
Yeah.
a little bit about that moment when you were in that building and some of the things that you were feeling. I think
Yeah.
that's very strong. That's a strong message.
It's interesting, and I'm going to tell you about that. And to touch on something you just said, though, too, that resonated with me. This book was in part born from the press conferences that happened during this fire and after the fire, where time and time again, I listened to leadership here in the city and the county say there was nothing that could have been done to stop this fire. At the same time, the same leadership urging people to rush to rebuild. And there was a disconnect in those two lines of messaging. We can't do anything to stop this, but we want you to come back and rebuild. And we know that the weather is going to continue to grow and become more extreme because of climate change, also because of where we're building, habitat change, how we're changing the ecosystems that we live in. So as I was listening to that, I just thought there's a disconnect here. And there is a clear signal here that the leadership doesn't want to learn from these mistakes that I saw firsthand. Had I been responding to this after the fact, after the fire was out, perhaps I wouldn't have known to have these questions and perhaps frustrations. But because I was there in the middle of this crisis from the beginning to pretty much the end, I knew that just didn't hold water. And the example that you are mentioning is a perfect example of a moment where very early in, I was waking up to the disaster that I was in the middle of, and a man-made disaster at that. And not just man-made because this extreme weather is man-made because of CO2, but also man-made in a way that if we could fix it, we could actually build communities that can withstand our growing extreme weather threats. I was at the Presbyterian Church in the Pacific Palisades. This is the building that you're referencing. And we had just returned from, or I should say, retreated from really the front line of this fire. This was the place that we went to first when the fire started. Little did we know at the time that we were at the area where the fire was making its way down from the Santa Monica Mountains, these rural mountains, into the first neighborhoods. And we're there, and I'm not seeing a single firefighter. I'm not seeing anybody but a few residents with hoses in their hands trying to stop the embers and flames that were catching on their homes from advancing. And I'm thinking to myself, are we in the right place? Like, did we go to, because, when you're in television news, it's all about getting to the place of action. You want to be in the place where that firefight is happening. You want to bear witness to really ground zero. And we got off at this one road because we had no idea where to really go. And we were just following the smoke signals at this point, the smoke in the sky from the fire. And I couldn't believe that we were at the place where this fire had started because nobody was around. Anyway, we retreat. And it wasn't until days later that I realized we were in the heart of it. We retreat from this location because it was dangerous to the point where we were running on foot, getting out of this smoke. There's a video I posted on social media later of me yelling at the crew, guys, we got to go. The embers were everywhere. So we retreated down to the Presbyterian Church, about a half a mile downhill, thinking that this was going to be a safe place. Thinking because it's right off of Sunset Boulevard, a major artery, one of the only arteries, in the town that connects the town to everywhere else in the city, that there would be help, that we would be surrounded by resources and we would be safe. We set up to go live. for the evening news. We go live. We do a few other live shots for the Weather Channel as well. I'm making this observation as I'm there because I'm looking at the intersection from where I am. I've got the church behind me. I have the intersection of El Medio and Sunset Boulevard. And I see a few drivers, like random people getting out of their car, helping traffic move because there was a roadblock. It was just
of course. Yeah.
And a guy runs by me behind me as I'm going live for the Weather Channel, and he screams, "Where are the firefighters?" Just screaming. And I remember my first instinct is, don't scream over my live shot, right? Like I'm trying to get this message, but I was like, but I stopped and I was like, he just said, I don't know if you could hear this. I say it to the camera. He's saying, "Where are the firefighters?" And in fact, we haven't seen any firefighters. There are just civilians that are helping guide traffic. After that live shot, after making that observation, the embers and the fire that we had retreated from up in the hill had made its way, quickly advancing to this church. And an ember catches seeds really under the roof of the church. And it's burning now and it's smoking and the flames are growing. And the Sunset Boulevard, nothing, no one at this point. The traffic that was being directed, it's stopped. There's no longer any traffic. I'm like, what do we do? Our crew looks for a hose, anything to get water on this. I call 911. And this was the wake up call. Because I call 911. It took a minute or two. I was on hold. It took some time to even be connected. And I'm giving the address. I'm describing the scene. I'm asked if there's anybody inside. I say, I don't believe there's anybody inside. And he was like, well, I don't know what to tell you. And I'm paraphrasing here. There's roadblocks. Help can't get there. I don't think they're going to be sent. And it wasn't like help's delayed. It's going to take some time. They're not being sent to where you are. And, and talking about a system just fracturing and failing in real time in a 3-hour window of time from when this fire began. We're in the second largest city in the country, the wildfire capital of the world, and help hasn't been sent to the Palisades, a place that is easy to get to, that has 2 fire departments close by. Help isn't being sent. I had to pick up a rock. And this was, and as I'm doing this, I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing? Am I like, Jesus, is this real? Like, is fire really going to hit this building? Am I causing more damage than this fire ever will? My mind was really struggling to process what I was actually seeing at the time. I pick up a rock. I break through this window because I saw this fire pull station. It was glowing red inside. And the thought, as misguided as it probably was that I'm going to pull this thing and like the movies, the sprinklers are going to come out and it's going to save this place. I smash this window. I reach in, I pull, I think I had to walk in. It was the second window, 2 windows I smashed. I walk in, pull this thing, nothing. And at this point, my photographer and audio technician they have a hose and they're trying to, just like one of the residents we saw earlier up by a home, they're trying to pour water on these flames. And it's like the most pathetic thing. It's like this thin stream, they're putting their finger over to create more pressure so they could clear the distance to reach the roof. And we just stood there. We stood there and we looked at this place and we're like, this is a church. This church has been here for, almost 100 years. This is in the heart of the town and, a place of worship. That's a landmark. That is a place that takes people in, that took refugees in. And when I say refugees, I should be specific here. Climate refugees. During an earlier fire, the Woolsey fire, people went there, host, Boy Scout classes and social groups. And so it is a vibrant part of this community that is going up in flames. It was really one of the first moments in what were many moments that even though this was such a clear moment, I still questioned, I still had doubt. And this was just the psychology of not being able to truly understand what I was seeing. But it was one of those moments that was just starting to seed in me where I knew not only is this town going to probably be lost, help's not being sent, but I also knew
it's not coming.
I also knew why. Why is help not being sent? What went wrong? What went wrong? And what will the lessons be? I never in that moment Dr. Ali would have imagined that the answer to all of this, as I began this very long-winded answer to your question, and I'm sorry if I'm taking up so much of
No,
your
no,
time,
no, no, no,
but
no,
it,
no, no.
but I began by saying there was nothing we could do to stop this. Hurry up and rebuild. And I was thinking to myself, I witnessed the collapse of a community that could have been prevented. There are lessons to be learned, and this is the answer to this. Like in my mind, absolutely not. It was that experience, along with so many others, and some that we've already spoken about here, that really fueled this desire to write this book and really document not just what I observed, not just what I witnessed, but what I was really inhabiting at that time, unlike any other story in my career, really.
The job that you are doing and the job some of the other people do in these scenarios where so you have removed your privilege of just viewing what is happening in front of you. You have chosen to be not just outside the frame. You want to be part of it. It's a dangerous job. It is easy to just observe, or you could just sit behind a desk and report it. That's an easier way to do it. Why do you have this desire to be in the mix of some of these scenarios, some of these catastrophes? What makes you go every day? Because there are easier versions of it.
I don't know where this pursuit of truth came from inside of me. I don't know what pushes me so much to get to the bottom of the truth. Maybe it's because I'm a middle child and I was always caught between my brothers telling me different sides of the story, and maybe very early on that just became part of who I was, this need to know and to understand. I've always wanted to just know the truth. And I have learned, and maybe this is wrong and ill-advised, but I have learned the best way to learn the truth is to be there in the middle of it. Yes, I could do this behind a desk, and I think a lot of people do write about these things and produce stories from behind a desk. But then you're not getting the full picture. And to bear witness to something like this, and there are so many other stories that are perfect examples as well, but to bear witness, to be there on the ground, you are bearing witness. You are seeing what is unfolding. You are capturing it. And when people down the road try to spin what it was that actually unfolded, when you're someone that's on the ground that's witnessed it, you actually know right from wrong. Know what the truth is. And so in the most primal, I think the most primal aspect of all of this, truth seeking, being there on the ground, is being able to cut through the BS. And in doing so, hopefully bringing resolution in one way or another, hopefully preventing something, in this case, this disaster, from happening again. To lose a home, to lose thousands of homes, to lose a community, that changes a city. That forever changes the many thousands of people who lost their homes. These are things that should not stand as okay, should not be brushed under a carpet. These are things that we need to figure out what went wrong and change it. And if I was doing this from a desk, I wouldn't even know to ask those questions. And this is, I'm not trying to, blow smoke up my own work or whatever. And there's better ways of saying that. But I do think that because we were there, my team and I were able to ask some of the most pointed questions to leaders at the time that ultimately led to a lot of sources coming forward to me privately, giving me even more details to better understand the truth of what happened. So not only did I know the truth of what really happened there that day, I saw it with my own eyes, but then in knowing that information, it opened up the floodgates to then having the other domino pieces that led to this effect, that had a cascading effect that led to that moment that I was witnessing. Also being in the middle of it, I've spoken with a number of journalists, obviously. I have many friends that are journalists. We are drawn to history. We are drawn to that front row seat of history. and history doesn't mean disaster. It doesn't mean the worst parts of history. It's history collectively in total. And again, maybe that's because I'm a middle child and I want to see, I want the best seat. I want to be there. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe in the most primitive way, that is truly what this is. But I want to be there. I want to see this. I want to better understand it. I want to provide help if I can. And I think all of these things are elements that make up journalism. We have been taught, I was taught in school, you never become part of the story. You don't step in, you don't go and save dogs, you don't break down a window. And I understand that. And I get that. And I think it's important to say when we did those things, that didn't become part of a story that I later broadcasted. The dog rescue became public knowledge because the dog parents, they were the ones that put it on their social media feed a week or two later. The Palisades Church window, I haven't publicly spoken about that. You're the first person I'm telling about this story, aside from the fact that it is written in this book. But I didn't write that story to sell a book. Like I could care less. I just think it really does illuminate, how things collapsed. These are moments that are really, they're life-changing. They are, and they can only be captured if you're there. And I chose to step in and break perhaps that code of journalism because of the humanity that I think ultimately really defines the best journalism. How can you really tell these stories and capture these stories if you're not also being a human, stepping up and helping as well, when you are one of the only people that can do it? If there are other people there to help, go for it. I will then witness that and I will then capture that moment. But if I'm the only person there, like I'm going in. So there's a complexity to, I think, the need to being there. I think at the most basic level, it's just being able to get to the bottom of the truth, which I don't think is something that we can do from a desk. And what I worry about as time goes by, as AI takes over, as it gets more expensive to invest in this kind of coverage, is that we will lose the humanity and we will lose our grip on the truth. We will become reporters telling stories that have been spun because more and more we may be covering these stories from desks instead of watching.
No, I think that your work is not just about documenting dramatic events, and it also lives in the uncomfortable space of truth telling, especially when the truth reveals preventable failures. That has to be a difficult burden. I know, especially in my line of work too, sometimes you come home and some of the things that you witness, events which are happening are painful, especially in your world. These stories are extremely painful, not only because of what is happening, but because they did not have to happen.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's an attempt. And I always appreciate people who can not just look at what is right in front of them, but what is the cumulative effect of what the end result came up to. I think that looking at system failures in any way or form, gives you a more global overview than just looking at what is in front of you. And I think that's what I really appreciate about your work.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Does it feel lonely doing these things sometimes?
In television journalism, I am surrounded by a team. So physically I'm surrounded and I'm not alone.
Right.
Really grateful for my team because they're incredible people and incredible journalists as well. And they get it. And they truly understand. And so you can share these experiences with them. And in that sharing, that loneliness that does exist, it lifts. But I'm not married to my coworkers. I leave work at some point in a day and you go home. And I'm very fortunate that I have a husband that was a journalist himself for a period of time. So he understands it. And I have a lot of friends that are journalists too and friends that are not. But regardless of those backgrounds and some of those shared common interests and commonalities in general, I do think when you're experiencing some of these stories so intimately, you're behind the veil. You really know what's happened, and especially when you're interfacing with I'll just say the public for the sake of this conversation, and I'm including my husband in that, people who are watching what is being shown on television or reading it, they have their perspective of things, but they don't have the full story. And it can be lonely having the full story and trying to explain it, but also realizing how hard it is to cut through one's already determined, sealed, set in concrete understanding of a story. And so that can sometimes be lonely, having the keys to the gate to the full story and trying to explain that and making someone understand what you've seen, what you've lived through. I also think, when you're going into these places, these are experiences that a lot of people have never had. And outside of that small world of the team that you're working with, that you have shared and lived through this experience with, it is lonely because it's hard to really. And I know that as a journalist, this is my role is to help someone else imagine this and envision it. But still, it is hard to bring somebody to live that moment in time to truly understand it. So there is that kind of loneliness. But I will say, I really am so fortunate that not only do I have such a good support system at work, and I work at CBS News, and they are a really great and dedicated team of journalists. And I'm not just saying that because they pay my bills. They are. I've worked with them now for 11 years. They have really supported this passion of mine, and it's amazing to be with people equally passionate. But beyond that, I'm just really very fortunate to have people in my life outside of work, my family, that keep me balanced, that also remind me when to eat, to wake up, to go to the gym, to call my mom and dad, things that are very easy to lose sight of when your brain is constantly spinning and thinking about the next story, the next thread of this other story I've been working on, or, who am I going to try to get an interview with for, the LA fires story. It's a less lonely world when you have people that may not understand what you do, may not have lived in your shoes, seen and experienced exactly what you've been through, but are there, want to understand, and more importantly, just want to see you healthy and thrive.
I feel exactly the same way, that if you do not have a strong support system, boundaries sometimes are just blurred.
So much of this is such a shared experience and learning from other people's experiences, and you have such an incredible life experience to learn from. How do you deal with the loneliness of the things that you have seen?
I struggle, Jonathan, like everybody else. We're all human, right? I mean, we're not perfect in any way or form. I struggle. I digress. I have become uncomfortable. I become unsure. I become angry. I become sad. But I've learned to realize that all of it makes me who I am.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you can understand that is also a part of you, you have an option, right? You have an option to digress, just become that, why is it happening to me? Or you can choose to move forward. And I think moving forward, you have to have a strategy. Of course, your support system, your family, your friends, and everybody around you. I think that help you when you're on your way down, right? So that's one thing. And then some of the healthy habits, one of the things, as I mentioned to you earlier, I paint and I sculpt and I write. It makes me, it gives me some purpose. I can shut all the noise off. It's almost my meditation. Whether it is, and realizing that this is life, this is what we signed up for. And we just have to keep on moving the right way, not like, not in a wheel. But it is not easy. It is not easy for anybody. I think that the first thing is the realization that you are in a certain state. And once you realize, you either do something about it, and if you can't do something about it, you ask for help. I think that the society tells you that if you ask for help, you are a weak person. It's absolutely false. I think that that's why we have society. Otherwise, we'd be still living, alone in the jungle somewhere. The tribes and the cultures and the villages and everything that made us who we are is the human connection. The human connection makes us is one of the strongest thing there is, and once you learn to have that connections, once you know that you can count on somebody, whether it is your spouse, your friend, your family, whoever that is, and then an understanding that you are as imperfect as anybody else.
Hmm.
I've seen company CEOs, I've seen governors, I've been even in a room with the two presidents once, and I realized that they're just humans. I mean, they're great, but they're just humans. And as long as we realize that we don't have to pretend to be who we are not. Of course, we do a certain level of you have to do some things to present your ideas and all of those things. But as long as you can remain close to your originality,
Uh-huh.
and then understanding that there are things you can do to even improve yourself. It's not easy. It's not easy for anybody. But I think as long as you can understand where you draw the line, you have to create some boundaries.
Yes.
Like for me, is there a balance in work and life? I mean, there was none initially in my career, but I've
Um,
learned that I need to create certain boundaries, and if I don't have them, I will emotionally collapse. Numbness can feel like protection, but it can also become a form of loss.
yeah.
And I think that is something that we all need to realize, that we are all imperfectly perfect. There is no perfect person that I know. My friends, most of them are perfect, I guess. I don't want them to hear that I'm saying that they are not perfect. Or my wife,
Yeah,
I will get into trouble for saying that.
yeah.
But
My husband's perfect.
that's the beauty of it, right? Even if you look at, art, I mean, look at Mona Lisa, right? You look at Mona Lisa, the face and everything, the way, he painted it, the hands do not match the way that he painted the face, or the background of the Mona Lisa is not what you see the face. Everything is perfectly imperfect or the other way around. I think that's what makes you who you and I who we are. But what makes us different though
I love that.
is not just looking at the differences between you and I, but finding the similarities between you and I, right? Sometimes we start with, oh, you are this and I am that, rather than starting with, we both have a lot of things which are in common. We may have some differences. We don't have to agree on everything. But as long as you are not hurting anybody else, as long as we are seeing the similarities which makes us stronger. Sometimes we forget, we are stuck in different systems.
You mentioned that numbness, and it made me also realize, there is a numbness I think that naturally sets in for all of us, and if you allow it to really take root, you ignore the warning signs, the sirens that go off that are naturally built in to snap you out of something. Growing up, I've always been very independent, and where that came from, I don't know. And you said something too, that awareness of asking for help, not being afraid to ask for help. I feel like I've learned more and more over time the importance of asking for help, how to find that help, how to stop carrying, the load all by myself as if I'm the only one that's capable of doing whatever it is that I'm doing, which obviously that's not the case. So I asked you that because I was truly curious, and you're right.
Yeah.
It's
And resilience is not always have to be a loud declaration. Sometimes it is simply the refusal to disappear.
yeah.
Because you can disappear. It's an easy way out in many ways or form. You can, whatever passion and goals you have, you give up, and whatever you believe in, whatever your passions are, whatever your why is, if you're not getting it, you can extinguish that flame, or you can choose to continue to be. And I think that's what resilience is. I often feel that resilience is romanticized from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
From the inside, it is usually uneven, repetitive, and very human. And that's what makes you and I, who can have a dialogue. And I think that goes a long way. So I do have a questions about that. So, what separates those who move forward from those who remain emotionally trapped in the devastation of things? You have seen a lot of people. Some have gone. Some have overcome their challenges, and some who are always stuck. Whether it is in some of the crises that you have seen, whether from the witness standpoint or from being part of those events. What makes people prevail?
Oh, that's a great question, and it's a complex one. I think there's so many different answers to it, but I think there's a common theme that I've noticed among the people that I've spoken with, those that have kind of been stuck in the past and those that have found a way forward. And I think on both extremes, stuck in the past, moving forward too fast, I think there's red flags there. I think it's about finding that balance. I think it's nostalgia, especially when it comes to losing a community, something like a fire, like the Los Angeles fires. I think nostalgia is what defines someone's path forward. Those that I've seen struggle the most are those holding on to the past, some version of the past, stuck in the past, seared into their minds as if the fire did not happen, not able to even recognize yet what they saw, not even able to come to terms with the trauma and the PTSD that exists. And then there are those on the flip side that are trying to push too fast through, trying to clean the slate, start over, rebuild, driven perhaps by nostalgia as well, what once was. So there are those that are paralyzed and those that are moving very fast. I think the happy medium and the ones that I've noticed that have really handled recovery well are those that are vocal. To our conversation a few seconds ago, that learn to ask for help, that place value not in things lost or things recovered, but in people, in community, in this sense of the fabric of what made a home, a neighborhood and a village, You know, there's a historian, Randy Young. His mother was one of the first people to truly document the Palisades from 1922 when it was founded to when she died later. I believe it was in the 70s or 80s. And he has inherited this role. And he, I think, really walks that perfect fine line. His home was saved and spared. So it's a different struggle that he deals with. But he has seen his entire community, which truly is the legacy of his family because it was his family's work documenting it. He has seen it destroyed. But instead of holding on to the past or pushing too fast into the future to rebuild quickly, he is bringing the community together in ways that I haven't seen many other people do. And I really feel like living a shared experience lifts you up from loneliness in obvious ways. I think it's also so helpful in purging these things that live within and exploring those things that live within, that until you actually say them out loud, you may not even know they're there festering, building, growing in ways that could be detrimental to your health. I know a number of people who were so personally impacted by this, who lost homes, who became so ill afterwards, and really depressed to the point where they couldn't move from whatever rental they were living in because they were so trapped in this past state. Anyone who has had a first love that has lost that love, I think they may know some of this, where you replay all the things that went wrong. And we also, if we want to use this love analogy, you can also see the warning signs and the red flags from people who move on from a first love lost too fast and find a second love really quickly. Like, what's going on? Yeah. So not that what I'm talking about is so abstract that I need to bring love into this as some kind of analogy, but the ones that really recover in the healthiest way I have seen and learned are those that find that happy balance, that medium. They're not trying to forget, but they're not trying to move on so fast too. It's that balance. It's about people. It's about connection. And I've learned a lot from that. There are times when, and I don't know, you must have this because you're so exhausted. I'm sure you're exhausted, all the many hats you wear. It's easy to say no to stuff. It's easy to say, no, I can't do this. I can do it. I like through what I have seen and witnessed, like I now say yes. And I don't say yes to everything. I'm not going to burn myself out. You know, I still protect my energy when I can. But I've also learned like this could be an isolating world in many ways. I think my job can perhaps amplify some of that isolation. But in seeing the way survivors of anything move forward and the ones that have really learned how to do it, like, you know, I try to carry that lesson of togetherness.
I think that you use the word love, and I know that we are not professionally, we're asked not to use this word as much. But at the same time, I think what you're doing is because of love for something, not just for yourself, but maybe love that you have for the people over there, love for that dog that you saved, right? So it is okay. I think it is completely okay to mention this because, we dehumanize our professions.
Yeah.
Right? Love and in healthcare. I mean, of course, I mean, the patients who's dying in front of you. I mean, it is not just a job there, I mean, there is a love for humanity. You want to make sure it affects you. When things don't go right, it affects you. It changes your inner architecture.
Yes.
It changes your threshold levels. I think that, and I think that your book, Torched, it emerges from both reporting and the living experience that you had. When you sat down to write, what did you want people to understand? What is the message there?
It was a completely different message when I began. The book was it was truly a very different book. My literary agent called me up and was like, I think you've got a second book here. I think there's something you should explore. And initially it was called Wild Land, LA, capitalized. And it was about, the history of risky building, the pioneers that first discovered the Palisades, how, through that pioneering spirit, we domesticated a space that perhaps we were never really meant to live in. As risky spaces go, the Palisades is pretty risky. Wildfire is a natural part of the ecosystem. And so if fire comes, and we have for a very long time tried to hold it back. The story evolved into Torched over time as people within City Hall, the county, beyond, were coming up to me, were reaching out to me, email, DMs, phone calls, after press conferences, a pull aside, telling me you gotta explore deeper. You have to explore deeper. This could have been prevented. This cannot happen again. And I think that is the message. This could have been prevented. This should not happen again. Our weather is changing. Climate change is real. The impacts we see every single day, and every wildfire is just one signal of what we're going to face. The wind is not going to calm down. The historic wind that struck on January 7th, 2025 and fueled this fire, we're going to get that again. The weather is not reversing, but that doesn't mean we are hopeless. And I'm not just trying to find hope so that people have hope because climate change is such a terrible topic to talk about sometimes because it's depressing and you can feel hopeless. There really is reason to hope. We have been evolving since we have been cavemen. Our homes from just the earth to caves to now what we have is these luxury mansions for those lucky enough to have luxury mansions. We have been evolving, but we have stopped evolving mid-century, last century, 1950s. More than 50% of our homes were built before 1980. We have stopped adapting. And, obviously this is very different. We get new cell phones every year, right? We're always adapting the technology. I'm in no way proposing we update our homes every year, but I think it is time to reimagine, especially in places that are impacted by extreme weather, especially in the wildfire capital of the world. We need to reimagine the ways in which we rebuild. They're already reimagined for us. They're just information that's not being pushed to us, which that's up to our leadership that I do believe is right now asleep at the wheel. My hope is that in reading this book, people will see a clearer path forward, leadership will understand the true responsibility they have in guiding people forward to rebuild communities, because unfortunately, these communities have a rare opportunity to rebuild in a way to truly prevent the same thing from happening, to prevent history from repeating. Unfortunately, I am seeing history repeat itself if the rebuild carries on as it is. It's moving fast, but we're only a year and a half-ish in, and there is time to not even slow down, but to reimagine the blueprints with materials that are already out there, fire resilient materials already out there. And so my hope is people see what went wrong, so that when we have historic weather that is forecasted a week in advance, as was the case with the Palisades fire, we listen. We as a community listen, our leaders listen, take it seriously. But also, before that happens, we rebuild in a way that is more resilient. I really do believe that we can live with this very extreme version of Mother Nature right now. As we work on reducing our carbon footprint, reversing this cycle of climate change, which will take many, many years. We know the math. Anyone listening to this, I'm sure, understands on a surface level how difficult that is, but how it is possible. It's just going to take time. But changing the way we've impacted our habitat, where and how we build, especially, that's a way to build an armor into a community very quickly. And I hope that's one of the takeaways.
And I think that is a great message. Like I always say, as love and kindness are close cousins, I think hope, resilience, and optimism, are close cousins too. Neither is passive. All are practices that we need to do. Jonathan, this has been a deeply meaningful conversation. I hope I didn't bore you.
Not at all.
With my questions. I'm definitely not a trained journalist by any way or form. I really appreciate everything that you have said. Sometimes it is the moments that reveal what is essential and what is fragile. What you are doing is essential. It is the truth, and you are showing what remains possible. Any final thoughts?
I hope I wasn't boring you. I am much more comfortable asking the questions and answering them. I really appreciated this conversation, Dr. Ali. There is a chemistry. So thank you for your interest in this and for asking such thoughtful questions. I feel like this was like unpaid therapy. So I appreciate it.
Well, by the end of the day, I am a doctor, so that helps.
Yeah, I know.
Well, thank you for your work, and thank you for your honesty. I can't wait to read your book, Torched, coming in May by Simon & Schuster. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me on Fractured But Fearless. I appreciate you very much, my friend.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.